Hello friends, welcome. Today I want to talk about how God's sons, Christ and Citadel, which is Jesus Christ and Peter Citadel, are protectors of all God's kingdoms if there was ever a need to be. So Father God had two sons that come around from him, and Father God was in space at this time, and he was 9 foot tall and shaped like a bullet. And he decided just before the first creation of the earth, whatever period of time that was, 4 billion years ago, to have two sons. And two parts of him come away from himself, from his spirit. And on one side was Christ, and the other side Citadel. So that's what he named them. Now, Christ's name has a meaning, so does Citadel's, and Christ means the safe haven, and Citadel means the safe retreat. So they're protectors of all God's kingdoms, and he has 200 worlds and 200 spirit realms. And so Peter said to me so many times, I knew it was God's words as well, what if? What if? He said that so many times to me, maybe 10 times, 6 to 10 times. And I knew it was, what if? So allow for anything that possibly could happen. So Father God come about from the Big Bang, and it was an amazing event to bring him about, a God, all-powerful. And there is nothing that Father God cannot do. Nothing is impossible to God, Peter said. So he come about from the Big Bang, and the first thing he done was call out, Father, 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 in all his immensities, and there was no answer. So Father God entertains the belief that maybe there are other gods, or at least one other God, apart from himself. And Peter said to me later on, and this was much later on when he come about, but just at the creation of the beginning of earth, at some point after that, his coming about, he said, I've heard Father God calling out for his Father. So he does believe there's a possibility there is another God or other gods out there. So this is why he had Christ and Citadel as protectors of all his kingdoms, because very unlikely he'd have to be absent from us and looking after us. But what if? What if he did have to be absent and go into another realm where gods exist, or a God exists, his Father? So, of course, he's a child. He wants to find his parent, naturally so, and he hopes there's one out there one day. So let's say he did go and he was out of contact with all his worlds and spirit realms, and there's 200 of each. He'd want them to be looked after still. So the other thing that Peter told me is that he and Christ can repulse an attack by God. So a God could attack them and it wouldn't harm them in the slightest bit, because Father God gave them the ability to repulse an attack by any God. And of course, Father God's never going to attack them, but what if there are other gods? Because gods have two natures, of light and dark, like we all do. And, that means you could get an evil God. Unlikely, but you could. And most would choose to be good, like Father God has. But they have the two natures within them. So the possibility that there are bad gods out there, if there are any others, is true. It could happen. So this is also why in our spirit realm we have to keep evolving to be better people, because one day we'll, in billions, trillions of years maybe, we will make the evolution to plane 11, because plane 10 is the highest one so far, and we will then go on to go for a plane where we learn how to start mastering being a god, because Father God puts no limits on us. We've got his spirit. Eventually we could evolve enough to become gods and goddesses ourselves. That's true, but it's an infinitely long time away yet. We're just children, even if we're thousands of years old, some of them are in spirit, we're still but young children in comparison to that. So it's about, all these planes are about learning, evolving, finding more of your true self, your spirit self and higher self, and all these different things. So there is a transitional plane, plane 11, and God lives on plane 12. So he'd want his children to be able to be gods, but he'd want to make sure they're all going to be good gods, wouldn't he? So that's why people have to better and better and better and better themselves as they go through the different planes of spirit, so he can tell for sure they're all going to be good gods. So the potential of that having gods and goddesses is there, but it's going to take an infinitely long time before that ever happens. So he wanted protectors in case he did have to ever go absent. And Peter told me, Christ and I have a dormant facet each. And to me, right away, that meant, it meant that they could communicate together. If a god ever attacked another god, they could defend themselves from that god, repulse an attack from that god, and join their facet, because they can communicate any distance apart. Christ and Citadel, their abilities are very advanced. They could communicate to join their facets, and when their facets are joined, they would both become instantly gods, and they'd be all-knowing and all-powerful, and they could then defend all our planes and spirit realms, couldn't they? So that's why it's done. And maybe if Father God did have to go absent, they'd automatically do it just to be watching over us all and making sure everything was all right. So that's why they are protectors. So Christ, the safe haven, and Citadel, the safe retreat. And that was an interesting story, and we can know that we're well protected, that God looks after us, but if he was absent, then his sons will look after us. There's another one that came around from God later on, but not a son. It was a friend of God called Octavius, and he actually went and looked after another realm, spirit realm of Father God, and he took their form, which is more portly than what we are as human beings, but there's humanoids on all 200 worlds, I'm sure, and spirit realms beyond for each world. So it's amazing, isn't it? And it's wonderful, and I'm enjoying sharing my understandings that I've known for so long, and have been 29 years waiting to tell these stories. They've been pent up inside me, wanting to share, but now's the right time. So it was great. And I loved it. And, so many wonderful stories that Peter come out with about him, Christ, and Father God, and Octavius and stuff. So it's beautiful. Anyway, so that's why they're protectors, just in case. What if? Love and light to you, friends. Neil.